What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we are going to be looking at a random magic card. This one actually, I just clicked on the random card button, so actually on my screen I can see what it is, and yeah, we're in for well, I want to say we're in for a treat, but I'm not exactly sure. We will see. What we're looking at today is a Soulgorger Orgg. It is a 6/6 Nightmare Orgg, not Ogre, not Orc. No, it's an Orgg, which I'm sure is some kind of copyright free version, which is weird because there are like goblins and orcs already in the game. So like I'm not exactly sure what the story is there. But anyway, Soulgorger Org, again, yeah, anyway, and it's not like pbs.org. No, it's spelled with two G's, just cuz. So it's or GG. So your options at this moment are to either do this or GG, as in say to scoop. I don't know. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and choose to believe that that was intentional on the designer's part because GG has been the synonym for good game for an incredibly long time. This particular card came from Judgment, which Judgment had a lot of weird stuff in it. Like that whole set was just chocked full of bizarre. And so, and one of my personal favorite cards of all time is from Judgment. And I'm going to go ahead and throw that out as a little bit of a teaser because I think I'm calling it now. That particular card, my single favorite Magic card of all time, is going to be episode number 100, and I'm going to talk with you about it then, and I'm really excited. But that is not what we're looking at today. It's from the same set, but that's definitely not what we're looking at today. So Soulgorger Org, 6/6 for 5. So with trample. So okay, 6/6 for 5 with trample. Same stat line as Ilharg the Razebore, also same mana cost. If you want to take a moment to appreciate power creep, let's compare Soulgorger Org to Ilharg the Razebore. Now, one is an uncommon that was printed in what, 2003 or something like that. Actually, 2002, I think it was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Early 2000s compared to a mythic rare that got printed in 2019. So it's like way not fair to compare these two, but what the heck, let's go for it. So Ilharg the Razebore, 6/6 trample for 5, so 3 generic and 2 red, which is the exact same mana cost as Soulgorger Org. So Ilharg the Razebore, it not only has stat lines higher than its mana cost, which usually is a sign that something is too powerful, but it also gets to cheat a creature from your hand into play for free, tapped and attacking whenever it attacks. So it's freaking bonkers. That card is amazing. So let's compare it to Soulgorger Org here. So 6/6 for 5, what else do you get in addition to a 6/6 trampler for 5? When Soulgorger Org comes into play, you lose all but 1 life. So if you are at 20 when this thing drops, you lose 19 life the moment this thing comes into play. And when Soulgorger Org leaves play, you gain life equal to the life you lost when it came into play. Let's appreciate that for a second, guys. So when it comes into play, so yeah, this was actually something the Soulgorger series. There's a whole Gorger series from Judgment. The other one that has gotten really that has been used to some pretty interesting effect is World Gorger Dragon, I believe is what it's called, where when it comes into play, you actually exile all of your permanents except it, and then when it leaves, you bring them all back, and there are ways that you can loop that infinitely to produce infinite combos to kill people. But yeah, things where like when cards come into play, they blink out of existence and all kinds of weird stuff. But anyway, so Soulgorger Org here, it's not one of those. There is no really good combo that you can execute with this. At least not that I'm aware of. So when it comes into play, you just lose a whole mess of life. If your opponent shocks you or something, you better be able to remove your own Soulgorger or get instant speed or gain some life somehow. Now, the one thing about this that would make it like the idea of this powerful creature that is below its casting cost, or that is tougher than its casting cost, coming into play and you having some kind of downside, I'm cool with. I like the idea of paying a cost that is not the mana cost. Compare this to something like the Hunted Nightmare that's in Ikoria, that is a 4/5 for 3, and when it comes into play, you put a death touch counter on one of your opponent's creatures. Like, or your opponent is able to put a death touch counter on a creature they control. Like, that's interesting. You're giving your opponent an advantage if they have creatures down, but you are getting a 4/5 with menace for 3. So you're getting a significantly better creature than um, than the stat line. And I mean, you're potentially giving your opponent the way to kill it on top of it. So that's like that downside is kind of interesting, flavorful. It makes sense. So that's something. There's also a series that I believe was also in Judgment called the Wormfang series. So there's like Wormfang Hydro, Wormfang Newt. And when they come into play, you exile a permanent of a certain type. So like Wormfang Drake is a 3/4 flyer for 3, and when it comes into play, you exile a creature. But then when it leaves play, you bring the creature back. And so that's one of those where, like, okay, that's a downside. You're having to sacrifice something on board, but the other thing you're doing is kind of tucking it away for safekeeping. So that's like if I were to play Wormfang Drake, I now have a 3/4 flyer for 3. That's a pretty great value, and it's possible that my turn 2 is something useful, like a Priest of the Forgotten Gods, for example, like a 2-drop that I really want to hang on to. But let's say I have a Wrath in my hand and my opponent's stuff is getting out of hand. Maybe I'm going up against an aggro player. So what I could do is theoretically tuck the Priest of the Forgotten God under my Wormfang Drake, wrath the board, everybody dies, my priest is back because she was like tucked away. She was exiled until the Wormfang Drake left. So that's something where you can work around the downside to get value. On its surface it's bad, but there are ways around it. There are things you can do so that it kind of takes the edge off. Soulgorger Orgg, though, I mean, if it had lifelink, if it had lifelink in addition to everything else, then you'd be down to 1 for a turn. But it would start gaining you life again, so you could build back up. And then if it died, you'd also get all of that other life back. That could be interesting. That could be very interesting, actually, because then you would be changing the rules of the game in an interesting way. Because then your opponent is left with a dilemma. Okay, because the person who has Soulgorger Org, all of a sudden you're at 1 life. If your opponent has burn, they can just ping you and that's it. You're toast theoretically. Yeah, any amount of damage directly to the face. I mean, there are ways around it. There are ways to react, of course, but ultimately, like that's a fringe scenario. That's not going to happen every game. And a lot of other games, you're actually going to be able to survive. You're going to be able to untap with it, and you're going to be able to start snowballing out of control and actually building back up, potentially get further than you were before. And your opponent's in a rough situation because the Soulgorger Org is what is gaining you that life. But instead of, and so they have the option of, okay, do I kill it and allow your life total to then, jack up to, significantly higher than it was previously. Or is there some way that I can race your life total down before Soulgorger gets you out of reach? That would be interesting. That would be cool. But it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that at all, in fact. So as a 6/6 with Trampler, this is an aggressive creature as a 5-drop, but it completely leaves you vulnerable by dropping your life total to 1. So like if you have aggressive Tramplers like this, like it doesn't even have haste. If it had haste, that'd be something. That's another thing. You notice that nowadays it feels like everything has haste. Everything either has haste or an ETB effect or a mutate effect. Like the value happens the moment it hits the board. Like having to like play something and then wait for the turn to come around, like that just doesn't happen in standard anymore, at least. So on arena, like I just don't feel that. I almost never have a moment where I play a creature and like, okay, I hope it survives. Like that almost never happens because just the whole world has haste right now. Um, but Soul Org doesn't have haste. So it's a situation where I could be at 20. I could be even higher than 20 if I have some other life gain action. And I play Soulgorger Org, and all of a sudden I have a 6/6 Trampler that I only paid 5 mana for, but I have a 6/6 Trampler, and my life total is at 1. In what situation do I want that? Like, honestly, like I love finding weird, janky things to do. And I mean, I guess Soulgorger Org could be a fun, janky way to take advantage of Sanguine Bond, which is a card that whenever you gain life, your opponents lose life, I believe is how it is. So Soulgorger Org could be a way to just get one really big hit off of that. So you play Soulgorger Org with a Sanguine Bond down, you lose a whole mess of life. Um, and then you can sacrifice Soulgorger Orgg and gain a bunch of life. I'm sure there are other ways to manipulate that, but I think, yeah, in black drain kind of effects, like maybe there's a way around it. Maybe there's something you could do there. Um, ooh, another thing is if you have a card like Teysa Karlov, I believe the newest one, where whenever death triggers occur, they trigger twice. Soulgorger Orgg could all of a sudden could work pretty well there because you play it, you lose, and now you couldn't put that in a commander deck because she doesn't have access to red, but just assume that it's a 60 card, or assume that that rule is not applicable in whatever format that you're in. Or let's say you have a Mardu deck and she happens to be in it, or something. So you have Teysa down, then you can play Soulgorger Orgg, lose a whole mess of life, sacrifice the Soulgorger Orgg immediately, and you get the Leaves play trigger. Oh no, but it's not a death trigger. So never mind. That actually wouldn't work. Just kidding, you guys. If you could find some way to double up the death trigger, that way you would effectively double your life total. That could be cool. Again, but then it's kind of expensive for that. And the card was designed to have the benefit of being a 6/6 body with trample. That is what this card is supposed to be bringing to the table, and it's just, yeah, I don't know. The cost is just way too steep. Cost is way too steep. Now, this thing could cost two, and I probably still wouldn't play it. Although, actually, if it cost two, I could put it in some weird combo. The combo shenanigans would be a lot easier to pull off then. So maybe if it cost two, but if this thing costs like, I'm trying to think what mana cost. So maybe two is a maybe. If I get a 6/6 trampler with this downside at two, I might consider it. Maybe. If it was at three, probably not. And so it definitely not at five. Yeah, I feel like there needs to be. This card is just missing something. It's a cool idea. It's a cool design. I like the concept, and it's one of those cards that when you look at it, it feels like there should be a combo. Like I see there's a combo in you. There's somewhere. Oh, actually, speaking of Wormfang, the Wormfang cycle, Wormfang Manta, that thing freaking rules. If you're not familiar, check it out. It works very similar to the Soulgorger Orgg, except instead of losing a whole mess of life, you skip a turn. But then when it dies, you take an extra turn. So again, if you can double up that effect, or if you can stifle the original effect so it doesn't go off for whatever reason, that's pretty fun. And so then you can get a nice little bonus. But Soulgorger Orgg here doesn't really, I don't know, the payoff to that is life gain. If you were to pull off some weird, goofy way of doubling that effect, the benefit you get out of it is life gain. And there's so many good 6/6 options there. Like, nobody needs this card. Like, it just, I don't think it was very good when it first came out, and it hasn't aged well, which is a shame, because I think it has the potential to be fun. And it is a nightmare. It's a nightmare Orgg. So if you play this card, I'm trying to get to a joke about or GG. Um, yeah, so it's like, oh, I can attack for 6 or GG. I don't know. I didn't get there from here. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, apparently I don't have the jokes in me at the moment, which, I don't know. Do I ever have the jokes in me? I don't know. I'll have to ask my wife sometime. I have no doubt she'll say no. But all right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for hanging out. I appreciate you. Yeah, Soulgorger Orgg. Yep. All right, guys. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you next time.